Yo, what up? Welcome to another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. I'm Patrick, flying solo. So the Warriors, they beat the Phoenix Suns 123-112 at Chase Center. And just to quote Gladiator, are you not entertained? This was probably the Warriors' best start of the season. They just jumped all over the Suns. Klay Thompson, I mean, I said before, this is one dude who is definitely looking forward to this game. Obviously, if you remember those first two Suns games in Phoenix where Klay just was in his feelings, right? He was going through a lot of stuff. He had not played all summer. He wasn't in rhythm, didn't have his legs under him, was hearing all the chatter, and he was kind of a mess for those two games against the Suns, especially. And he was jawing with Booker. He was hunting shots, getting the Warriors out of their offense, all this stuff. There was just a lot of things going on. And even after the second game, actually, that was a game where the Warriors had a team meeting, the players did, and Draymond said some stuff, took a bit of a leadership role again, probably the first time he's really spoken up at that point since he'd punched Poole in the face. But Klay was much better after that game. And even though he's had ups and downs since, he hit his stride towards the end of December. And for most of this year, this calendar year, he's been solid. And for me, I was like, he is definitely going to come out in this game and not necessarily hunt shots, but really, really be on, especially being at home. He scored 33 points in the first half, and he was like 8 for 12 or something from three. He only ended up with 38 points, which is fine. You know, I mean, the Suns came back in this one, but Klay overall in 34 minutes, 14 of 23 from the field, 8 of 14 from three, only 2 for 5 from the free throw line, which is kind of crazy. He had 5 boards, a steal, like I said, 38 points plus 4 on the night. To me, this brings at least his story for the season full circle to some extent. Obviously, there's 13 more games left, and knock on wood, a long postseason run. But for him to have all those doubters, all those people questioning him, and I always felt like he would get back to at least the shooting stroke, the sniper that he was before. I think he's gotten past that. I said recently that he's looking closer to the 2019 all-around Klay, at least on the offensive end. Yes, he's a step slower on defense and in general, but part of that is injury and part of that is also just age, you know? So it's great to see him at this point. It was just all about him kind of getting past these mental hurdles. And then also, like I said, getting his legs under him and then letting the game come to him. He started doing that. And the rest is kind of recent history, you know? So playing this well against the Suns, against Devin Booker, I think was very, very meaningful, at least on the surface, you know. But no matter what happens, this is a good sign just for Klay Thompson overall. Like I said, the Warriors, they had a big lead and then they coughed it up. But ultimately they, pulled it out. They won by a decent amount. It wasn't one of these crunch time things, nail biters, execution things where it could have gone either way. And I'll be honest, like, we've seen two types of games from these Warriors this year. The ones where they get a lead and then they cough it up and lose and don't close out, and on that 5-game winning streak, recently they would start poorly and then catch up and then ultimately prevail, right? So it's like, can they put something end to end together? This wasn't necessarily end to end. They never gave up the lead once they had it, but at the very least, they started strong and then they finished strong. That part in the middle, third quarter, they could work on that. You know what I mean? But slowly but surely, maybe they're starting to figure some stuff out. I know we've said that before, but you know, you got to keep believing with these guys to some extent, right? The big question, obviously, is will any of this travel? And we keep saying, yeah, I think so. Maybe it will. Maybe it will. And you just keep your fingers crossed, right? And hope that they found something. You can make the argument that when Steph came back against the Lakers, he wasn't in rhythm and the team wasn't used to him yet. Guys had to kind of shift around in the roles. Maybe coming home, winning a couple games, maybe all of that is more in sync. I've talked about how this team this season has had problems just flipping the switch and willing itself to victory. And what I like about Steph is, especially in that Bucks game, especially in the Suns game, he looks determined. And I'll put my money on that. You know what I mean? I think that with him, that's where the magic of this team really, really comes from. So I will, as some people have said to me, and I agree, like you won't fully count this team out until they're really, really, really eliminated. We may have doubts. We may look at the stats. We may look at the numbers, but, we are cautiously optimistic until they prove it on the road. Bottom line, I think there's a lot of folks out there who have just rode with this team all season, and we've seen the same patterns, right? They've won a couple, then they lose a couple, they look good at home, and then they can't translate that to the road. So once that happens, then we'll all feel a little bit more confident in where this team is going. This upcoming 5-game road trip is going to be really, really, really telling. As good of a time as any to prove people wrong, to all of a sudden win some road games. And it's feasible because it's not like these guys had never won road games in their history before. They've won a ton, obviously. So this strange year, it's such an aberration. Like what is it? You know what I mean? Is it because the young guys are not as good on the road? Is it because the vets, they're just not feeling it? Is it because the coaching is a little bit less creative, less focused? But they're going to have a chance. And on this 5-game road trip, it's like, I want 3-2. That is at the very minimum what I want, right? So they get the Clippers, they go to LA, then they go to Atlanta, play the Hawks, they go to Memphis to play the Grizzlies, then they go to Houston to play the Rockets, and then Dallas to play the Mavericks. So, I think they can get 3. Depending on which Warriors team shows up. Is it Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde? You know what I mean? If they put their best foot forward, we know that they can compete with anyone. But if they look like they did those 3 previous games on the road, then it's going to be a little bit more of, as I've said, deja vu all over again. So let's see how this all plays out. Jordan Poole, he had a good game. He's caught a lot of flack and he's catching a lot of hate, which I think is unfair because we've seen that with other players, like James Wiseman and stuff from the Warriors fan base. And that's obviously wrong and messed up, but there is fair criticism of Jordan Poole. And in this one, he played well. It came off the bench, played a chunk of minutes, 31 minutes, 8 for 16, 4 for 8 from the field, only got to the line once, 0 for 1, 6 assists, 1 board, plus 12, 20 points. So that's solid. He was attacking, he was picking and choosing his spots. He's been being a little smarter. And this is step 1, in my opinion, right? Because all season long, people have been like, he's not as good off the bench. The stats prove it, right? The counting stats. And so I think with him, if he can show that he can be this guy off the bench again, like he was last season into the playoffs and everything like that, then we're starting to see more of that guy. But again, he has to do it consistently, just like all these other dudes. And this whole team has to do it consistently. That's the thing about Poole, right? He's proven a lot of people wrong. And this season, he's kind of settling into this weird spot where like he's shown flashes of, oh yeah, I can make good decisions. But the majority of his games this year have been poor decisions, right? Poor passing choices, poor shot selection, poor decisions to dribble drive and then bounce it off his foot or his knee or his shin or his thigh. So those are the things. Can he be a better overall, smarter on the court player? Can he play better defense? Can he put that effort in? I mean, we saw a bunch of stuff on the road trip where he just wasn't. So is there more to Jordan Poole, right? We know that he loves the big moment. We know he loves to entertain the crowd. You know, he loves to hit buzzer beaters and all that stuff and prance around the court. And that's all fine and dandy. You know, that's fun. That's entertainment, you know, but can he do all the other little things consistently that matter? That's it. That's it, you know? And I think the doubts from people come from the fact that there's some decisions out there that are pretty obvious, you know, and that it seems like he doesn't learn from his mistakes. But I understand, and I've talked about this back and forth, like he's a young player, but he has a lot of responsibility. You know, he hasn't shown the improvement after signing that contract that takes effect after the season. But what can he do from here on out? Right? I said last episode, there's 14 games left, and there are going to be some tough games because other teams are also vying for the playoffs, for positioning, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, the Warriors are 1-0 in those final 14, you know? So Poole, just like everybody else, has 13 games left to show what they can do, to show that they are trying to win and trying to play winning basketball. You know, I mean, and that's the thing, you know, like since Jordan Poole has shown improvement the last few years, it's been like, what's his ceiling, right? I remember before the play-in where they lost to the Grizzlies, I remember that season after Jordan Poole played better after the G League stint. I was like, oh, you know, he could be like our version of Cameron Payne, because Cam Payne was playing well off the bench for the Suns that year. And I thought, okay, Poole could be that, right? And then it became, oh, wow, he's kind of like a microwave off the bench, like Jordan Clarkson. And then it was like, oh, he's kind of like Jamal Crawford. And then, oh, CJ McCollum. You know, he could be that solid scorer in a bunch of different ways, crafty dude like CJ, right? And then it became like, oh, you know, if he really, really got there, like his ultimate ceiling could be Jamal Murray. You know what I mean? That's kind of a stretch right now, but it's interesting because people do have him slated as, oh, he could be like an all-star someday. I don't know if I've gone that far with him, you know, but I put this out to you, actually. What do you think Jordan Poole's ceiling is? Who do you think is his best comp at this point? Do you think he's going to continue to be a volume 2000s era chucker, like a shooter who'll go for like, you know, 9 for 25 and get 26 points in a game? You know what I mean? Or is he going to figure it out, learn how to control a game with the ball in his hands, learn how to get other guys involved at the right time? You know, I mean, we see Steph do that. Oftentimes, Steph in the first quarter, he won't shoot that much. He will get other guys looks, get Klay going, get Wiggins going. And when Poole's out there, he'll try to get Poole going. And then he'll start getting his. Can Poole figure out how to really, really unlock some of these other skills that he might have? You know, we've seen it. We've seen a few games where he's done it, but can he really, really do it? So I'm curious. Let me know in the comments or tweet at me or something like that. I'm just really, really curious what other people think at this point, especially after this one. Andre Iguodala, he looks like he's kind of getting more into shape, in rhythm, all that stuff. He played 16 minutes, 2 for 3 from the field, 2 for 3 from the line, 2 boards, 3 assists, 1 steal, plus 19, highest plus minus on the night for the Warriors, and 6 points. I mean, we know, I don't think anyone ever doubted that Andre Iguodala, what he has brought to the Warriors over the years, he can still bring, in the sense that he's a ball handler. He's just brilliant on the court. He's savvy. He still has quick hands to make steals when people bring the ball down. But it's always been the question of, can he get on the court, right? We know last season he was out for a bunch, and then he made a cameo in one game for the playoffs. And then this season, the plan was just to shelve him until the second half of the season. We saw him play a few games, and then, a hip or a knee or something like that. So he's back now, and they need him because they don't have, Jonathan Kuminga. They don't have Anthony Lamb. They don't have Ty Jerome right now. Those two-way guys, they are out of games technically. And we'll see what happens in terms of who gets assigned, if either of them. I'm still assuming it's going to be Lamb, everybody's favorite. But if he can stay healthy, then that's something, right? That's another vet that comes off the bench. That's another vet who's a calming influence. That's another guy who can be on ball. That's another guy who plays better on the road because he's been there, right? He's 39 years old. So I'll take it. But that's, again, the biggest question. We'll see if he's still standing by the time the regular season is over. I hope so. But, we've seen in basically his last two stints, which was the cameo in the playoffs last year and then the cameo earlier this season. So, fingers crossed, but we'll take that one game at a time. At this point, the Warriors are, for the third time since the All-Star break, in fifth place technically. They have the same record as the sixth place Clippers, who, again, they're playing on Wednesday in LA. But the Warriors have the tiebreaker for now. So, hey, they're also 1.5 games behind the Suns. So there is a chance. I mean, it's wild. Like, it's just how stacked all these teams are together. They're also, 2.5 games out of the 11th spot and 3 games out of the 12th spot. So things can change quickly. This road trip is really, really important. And I mean, I still think no matter what, the Warriors are going to sneak into the postseason somehow, some way, whether it's in the 6th or 5th spot, or if it's in the play-in. I just don't see them getting completely shut out. But again, we'll see how these next few games go. You're looking at these. I mean, if they can get this Clippers game, that'll be huge because it just sets a very, very good tone. And I think they can, again, take anybody at any given time. They can come after Atlanta. I can see them winning that. Memphis, Ja is still out. Steven Adams still out. Brandon Clark is out for a while with that Achilles. And, we know the Warriors didn't like how they looked last time. But again, it's in Memphis. That's a challenge right there too. So I would assume they'd show up better. But then again, we've assumed they would show up better in a lot of other games this year, but it just hasn't happened. So in that Rockets game, that should be one they take. And then Dallas. Be interesting. First time seeing Dallas with Kyrie. And, as these teams gear up for the postseason, get closer and closer to the end of the regular season, everybody's going to be a little bit more focused and trying a little bit harder as they figure out where everybody lands in the standings. Fun win, like I said, super entertaining. And when they've won lately, it has been entertaining, and looking at some of the things that have bugged the Warriors this year, they didn't foul more than the Suns. They had the same number of turnovers and they got out rebounded, but they also chucked up and hit a bunch of threes. The Warriors were 19 of 39 from three, which is 49%. And the Suns were 4 of 21, 19%. So they were good on that. The Warriors, they were 14 of 24, though, from the line, which is terrible, 58%. And then the Suns were 16 out of 22 for 73%. So again, we'll see if this stuff travels, and we'll see if they can get up for these road games the way they have for, we've seen them get up for games that are quote unquote challenges, right? The Bucks game was a challenge, Giannis wasn't there, but It was on national television. It was at home after 3 bad losses. And then the Suns game, Klay was up for that. They're always up for Chris Paul, and they got it done ultimately. But can they bring it in some of these other games when they're not at Chase Center? That's the big question for this regular season. So anyway, that's all I got.